Ji Weining has someone he loves, but he won't tell me. That scumbag. His heart belongs to another, yet he still came to marry me. That day, I brought a lie and rounded up a dozen street thugs. We blocked the front and back doors, side windows, and even the dog hole of the tavern. Ji Weining and his little mistress were like mosquitoes caught in my palm. There was no escape for either of them. I stood at the tavern's entrance and shouted loudly, "Ji Weining, I know you're in there. Get out here right now. And you little tramp, come out too." In no time, a crowd of curious onlookers gathered around. I shot Eli a glance, and he immediately launched into an emotional tale about how Ji Weining abandoned his newlywed wife to fool around with his mistress. When necessary, Eli even managed to squeeze out a few tears, clutching a bystander's hand and crying, "Oh, my poor lady. She traveled all the way to Chang'an to marry him, only to be left as a widow in all but name." The crowd, naturally, was full of sympathy for me and indignation toward Ji Weining, their righteous fury directed squarely at the tavern. The stage was set, but Ji Weining stubbornly stayed hidden inside. If I hadn't seen him go in with my own eyes, I might have doubted whether he had already fled. "Ji Weining, if you don't come out, I'm bringing people in to drag you out," I threatened. At my words, Ji Weining finally appeared from behind the intricately carved wooden door, wearing his blue and white robe and holding a folding fan. If not for the dark scowl on his face, he might have even looked dashing. Honestly, he is quite handsome. I noticed that on our wedding day. But his personality is awful, always scowling as if someone owes him a fortune. "What nonsense are you causing now? Tell them to leave." Ji Weining's eyes blazed with fury. If not for the crowd, I'd think he might actually hit me. Not that I'd be afraid if he tried. After all, I've been through rough and tumble times on the border. How could I lose to a frail scholar? If he dares lay a finger on me, I'll beat him so badly, even his own grandfather won't recognize him. I shouted back, "Ji Weining, why don't you bring your little mistress out here first, then we'll talk about who's in the wrong today." As expected, his face froze at my words. "There's no mistress." "Stop this nonsense," he denied, his face pale. He reached out to grab me, but I nimbly dodged and lifted my skirt as I charged into the tavern. Behind me, I heard his frantic attempts to stop me. The tavern wasn't very large, with 2 floors. The first floor was a common hall where few patrons sat, enjoying the spectacle. The second floor had private booths, separated by wooden partitions. I ordered a lie to guard the stairs while I started searching the private rooms one by one. Several couples were caught in the act of passionate kissing, so engrossed they hadn't noticed the commotion outside. Each time I barged in, I quickly clasped my hands together in apology. Sorry. Please continue." I even helpfully closed the door behind me. Just as I was shutting one door, a flash of yellow darted past me. I turned around to see her hiding behind Ji Weining. At least she had the decency to feel shame. She clutched a handkerchief to her face, trying to conceal herself. "Sun Huixian, you've gone too far. I'm utterly disappointed in you." Ji Weining shielded the woman with a protective arm, his face full of disdain as he looked at me, his lawful wife. I sneered. "Who's gone too far here? Don't you know? I bet you and this woman have been involved for quite some time. If that's the case, why did you marry me? You're nothing but a scoundrel, coveting my family's power." "It's not what you think," Ji Weining stammered. He was terrible at lying. If it wasn't that kind of relationship, why did he flush with guilt when I exposed him? And why did he rush to shield her behind him? I sneered again, but pretended to relent. "I'm not the kind of wife who can't tolerate others. Since you have this attachment, let's bring her into the household." "No, she can't." Ji Weining's face alternated between green and pale. I smirked. "What now? Is your little mistress unwilling to be a concubine? Are you expecting me, the lawful wife, to step aside and let her take my place?" Under my firm insistence, Ji Weining's mistress was brought into the Ji household and settled in Lanyi courtyard, conveniently close to the study.
Great.
One step closer to divorce. I don't like Ji Weining, and he doesn't like me. The reason we're together is because of an absurd ancestral rule of arranged marriages between the Ji and Sun families. How ridiculous! Do they not realize that close family marriages often result in birth defects? By tradition, each generation's marriage candidates are chosen on a rotational basis among the family branches. In this generation, it just so happened that Ji Weining's father's branch was chosen for the Ji family, while my father's branch was selected for the Sun family. And, as luck would have it, Ji Weining is his father's only son. Equally unlucky, I'm my father's only daughter. So, no matter how much we despise each other, I was sent to Chang'an to marry Ji Weining. From the day I married him, I was miserable. Ji Weining, being a Chang'an native, loved his noodles, be it braised noodles, stir-fried noodles, beef offal noodles, or pancakes stuffed with glass noodles and meat. I, on the other hand, grew up at the border, but my mother was a pure Jiangnan woman. I inherited her eating habits, and I simply couldn't go a day without rice. In theory, what he eats and what I eat shouldn't concern each other. But that insufferable man complained about everything. In the morning, he said the sound of me slurping congee was annoying. At lunch, he griped that the smell of my sweet and sour fish was too strong. And at dinner, he criticized me for being extravagant with my 4 dishes and 1 soup. The nerve of him! I didn't even mention how his garlic-dipped vinegar made his noodles so sour that it gave me goosebumps and killed my appetite completely. I wrote countless letters, begging my father to take me home. But his reply was always the same. Chang'an is more prosperous than the border. You'll live a better life there. In my father's eyes, marrying Ji Weining was a blessing. Ji Weining is Chang'an's most talented scholar. If it weren't for the Ji-Sun family marriage arrangement, I would never have had the chance to marry him. But, oh, dear father, don't you understand? I'd rather eat sand-filled rice at the border than watch Ji Weining slurp his noodles in Chang'an. It was clear my father wouldn't come to take me home. My only hope of escape was to convince Ji Weining to agree to a divorce. Of course, having him officially divorce me was an option, but why should I give him the satisfaction? If he divorces me, it would imply the fault lies with me. Unfortunately, in our kingdom, women cannot initiate divorce. Otherwise, Ji Weining would have been divorced by me 800 times over by now. Ji Weining's little mistress couldn't have shown up at a better time. The deeper his feelings for her grow, the less he'll tolerate my existence. That's my chance to secure a divorce, with all the blame squarely on him. This way, when I return to the border with the divorce decree, my father won't scold me for being ungrateful. He'd even pity me, cursing Ji Weining alongside me while lending me his prized little horse to ride. That day, I noticed she looked unwell. Alai, take these 3 caddies of birds' nest to her to help her recover. As the magnanimous first wife, I decided to care for my little sister-wife's health. With any luck, she'd bear 2 children within 3 years and release me from this misery. Miss, this was a gift from the madam. Are you really giving it all to her? Alai asked as she reluctantly carried the bird's nest away, acting as though it belonged to her. I raised an eyebrow and waved dismissively. Just take it. Quickly now. I've grown tired of eating this stuff anyway. Skipping it for a few days won't kill me. My mother, being the quintessential Jiangnan beauty, not only passed on her delicate stomach to me, but also relentlessly made me develop a habit of eating bird's nest. She believed wholeheartedly that consuming a swallow's saliva would improve beauty and extend life. Alai returned with the bird's nest, her face twisted with disbelief, but also a hint of glee. Miss, concubine Pei refused it. She refused? I slammed the table and stood up. How dare she reject a gift from the first wife? Does she not respect me at all? Alai finally realized the gravity of the situation. In a household like ours, even if I gave her a pile of manure, Pei Shuamei should have graciously accepted it and worshipped it like a treasure.
Huh?
Pei Shuame, you've got some nerve. I must pay her a visit at Lani Courtyard. Although Lani Courtyard is named after orchids, there isn't a single pot of orchids in sight. Why it's named that, I have no idea. What I do know is that it's just as far from the main house as it is close to the study. With a crowd of servants trailing behind me, I made a grand entrance to the courtyard. It took nearly the time it takes for an incense stick to burn to reach the door. Madam, our mistress isn't feeling well and has already gone to bed, a little maid said, blocking my way. She had an air of calm servitude, neither arrogant nor humble. Gone to bed. My voice rose sharply. She's just a concubine. It's one thing for her to not pay her respects to me after entering the house. But now I've come to see her, and she dares to avoid me? Tilting my chin slightly, I put on a domineering demeanor. Someone drag concubine Pei out of bed for me. Even if she dies today, right there in bed, she has to come out to see me first. Alai led the others as they obeyed, pushing past the little maid and barging in. Fortunately, the staff at Lani Courtyard weren't particularly familiar with Pei Shuame yet, so they didn't put up much resistance. Just as Alai and the others reached halfway, Pei Shuame emerged on her own. She wore a veil over her face, exuding a mysterious charm like a peepa partially covered. I thought back to the day at the tavern. She'd been the same way, all veiled and reserved. It suddenly clicked. Ji Weining likes this kind of game. Oh, these Chang'an men, always full of tricks. Pei Shuame silently curtsied awkwardly. Clearly, she didn't respect me in her heart. I'd forced her into this house to be Ji Weining's concubine. She probably resented me. After all, they say the wife can't compare to the concubine, and the concubine can't compare to the secret affair. The sneaky thrill of their earlier meetings must have been exhilarating. Sun Huixian, what nonsense are you stirring up again? Someone must have tipped him off, as Ji Weining rushed over in a hurry. I turned around, head held high. I heard she was sick, so I came to check on her. Why the rush? Are you afraid I'll eat her? Thank you, Ji Weining replied, his face sour as always. But she doesn't need your concern. Every time I see his face, I can't help but fume. Did I owe you money or something? Even curtains get taken down and washed after a while. Who do you think wants to look at your perpetually gloomy face all year round? My words left Ji Weining pale with fury. His chest heaved violently, clearly enraged. After a long pause, he gritted out, "Go back. Shuame doesn't like seeing people. Don't come here unless it's necessary." Oh. So now I'm intruding on their private time? Well then, I'll just have to come here every day and irritate him until he agrees to a divorce. With a bright smile, I stepped forward and took Pei Shuame's hand. Her hands were unexpectedly large but soft and fair, with elegant, well-defined fingers. Let her go. Before I could get a proper look, Ji Weining stormed over, slapping my hand away as if I were some lecher trying to take advantage of Pei Shuame. Rubbing my stinging hand, I retorted, "I'm a woman too. Touching her won't make her lose a piece of flesh. Why are you so on edge? From now on, you're not allowed to touch her. Do you hear me?" Ji Weining's tone was harsher than ever. Oh, is this that infamous male possessiveness? Poor Pei Shuame. Could it be that she always wears a veil because Ji Weining doesn't allow anyone else to see her face? The thought made me reevaluate Ji Weining. He's borderline obsessive. Looking at Pei Shuame, I couldn't help but feel a little pity for her. Softening my tone, I said, "Sister, since you're new here, if you need anything, don't hesitate to come to me. There's no need to be overly formal." Pei Shuame stared at me, stunned. Her amber eyes were sharp and striking, oddly contrasting with her frail appearance. "Hey, the madam is talking to you. Say something." Alai barked, her tone harsh and impatient. If I were the wicked main wife in a storybook, Alai would undoubtedly be the lackey abusing her power. And such characters never survive past the second chapter. Perfect. I'm one step closer to securing that divorce. Although a lie tried to provoke her, Pei Xuemei remained frozen, staring blankly at me. It was Ji Weining, fiercely protective, who stepped in. I waited for his outburst, only to hear him say, "Xuemei, she's mute." "What?" I exclaimed in shock, completely unprepared for this revelation. Pei Xuemei was actually mute. According to Ji Weining, Pei Xuemei had saved his life. She became mute after being poisoned during the rescue. Because of this, he pleaded with me not to trouble her. A damsel saving a hero? No, correction. A beauty saving a hero. How poetic. I could almost visualize a 280,000-word tragic romance novel starring Pei Xuemei silently pining for Ji Weining, her unspoken love hidden deep within. At this moment, I truly wished I could compose poetry. Alas, I wasn't Ji Weining, whose belly seemed full of ink, so all I managed was a bland, "I'll take good care of you, Sister Xuemei." "There's no need for that," Ji Weining immediately interjected. "Just stay away from her." I rolled my eyes at him and said, "If Sister Xuemei is your savior, then she's my savior too. As husband and wife, we share everything. Naturally, I'll help you repay this kindness." I deliberately emphasized the word repay, leaving no doubt about the hidden meaning. If this were a storyteller scene, they'd narrate, "The first wife outwardly promised to care for her, but secretly plotted her demise." What exactly is this scheming woman planning? Tune in next chapter to find out. Ji Weining clearly caught my veiled threat. His face darkened, his voice dripping with anger. "Son Huixian, what are you scheming?" "Why don't you guess?" I replied with a sly smile. Then, I turned and marched away triumphantly, followed by my entourage. What happened next, whether Pei Xuemei panicked or Ji Weining comforted her tenderly, was none of my concern. After all, this was the effect I wanted. Let's see if he dares to divorce me now. Barely had I settled into my room when a servant came to report that third aunt wanted to see me. Third aunt was also born into the Sun family, and by familial ranking, I should call her seventh aunt. She'd already married into the Ji family by the time I was born. There's an old saying, "Rain after a drought, and an old friend in a foreign land." Though I had known third aunt before, being part of the same family made us naturally close after my marriage. Straightforward by nature, third aunt wasted no time. "I heard you brought that woman back?" "Yep. It's better to keep her under my watch than let him sneak around outside." I sipped my tea and added, "This pu'er is great. Where'd you get it? Buy me 2 pounds next time." Third aunt looked at me like I was hopeless. "How can you be in the mood for tea? By allowing him to take a concubine, you've broken the rule. Ji and Sun marriages forbid concubines." "How is that my fault?" I shrugged helplessly. She sighed heavily and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry. I've already written to your second granduncle. He'll demand justice from the Ji family. That little vixen won't last long." "Oh," I replied nonchalantly, thinking instead that Pei Xuemei better keep Ji Weining wrapped around her finger tightly, tight enough to defy both families' elders. But things didn't go as planned. Ji Weining defied expectations. After spending 7 consecutive nights in my room, I couldn't help but ask, "Shouldn't you go keep your sweetheart company?" He raised an eyebrow. "You're eager to send me away?" "Not at all." I forced a laugh. "I just feel sorry for her being all alone." "If you've got time to pity her, worry about yourself first." "Stop overthinking things," he retorted sharply. Overthink? I was diligently plotting my way through this family drama. Despite my hints, Ji Weining stuck to his odd routine, spending days with Pei Xuemei and nights with me. But as they say, a divided heart invites trouble. Half a month after third aunt's tea chat, my third granduncle took action. My usually absent-minded in-laws, devoted to their Taoist practices, personally came to apologize. "Huixian, don't worry. We won't let Ning act so recklessly. He'll be properly punished," my mother-in-law reassured me, her words earnest. But the trace of worry between her brows betrayed her uncertainty. Feigning concern, I lowered my gaze and replied, If my husband truly loves her, I'm willing to step aside. Absurd. My father-in-law slammed the table. You're the rightful wife of this family. Why should you yield? That rascal. Watch me discipline him. He stormed out before I could stop him. As the virtuous daughter-in-law, I pretended to hold him back. My mother-in-law, however, gently restrained me. Let him go. Ning's behavior has gone too far this time. It's good for his father to handle it, she said. I sat down again, outwardly worried but inwardly delighted, waiting for updates. Soon, blood-curdling screams echoed outside. My mother-in-law's hand trembled as she held her teacup. A maid rushed in, panic-stricken. Madam, please go save young master. If this continues, he'll die. The crash of broken porcelain rang out as my mother-in-law sprang to her feet, smashing my new bamboo patterned porcelain tea set. But who cared about that now? Where there's drama, there's me. We hurried to the scene. In the courtyard stood a bench, and Ji Weining, held down by 4 servants, lay face down, his backside bloodied and raw. The once proud first gentleman of Chang'an now whimpered like a beaten puppy. You brat. I told you to send her away. Are you listening or not? My father-in-law, drenched in sweat, waved the paddle menacingly. I thought this would break Ji Weining's resolve, but he stubbornly refused, insisting on keeping Pei Xuemei. Another round of savage beating ensued. Had my mother-in-law and I not intervened, Ji Weining might have ended up in the afterlife. Watching his bloodied figure, I felt an inexplicable pang of sorrow. It reminded me of when Ji Weining took a beating for me upon my arrival in Chang'an. Back then, everything in the bustling city fascinated me, especially the legendary pleasure houses. My first visit turned chaotic when I got into a brawl over redeeming a courtesan. Unable to best me, my rival tearfully reported me to the authorities. That night, Ji Weining bailed me out. While tending to my wounds, he asked gently, "Does it hurt?" Thinking back, his cautious movements then held a tenderness I didn't notice, as my mind was preoccupied with the courtesan. In my folly, I used the household funds to redeem her, hoping to repay it later. But I was caught within 3 days. Ji Weining took the blame, saying punishment would harm my standing as a new bride. I had no idea it would lead to a flogging. To my shame, I developed feelings for him during his recovery. But before love could blossom, he began sneaking out to meet Pei Xuemei. Men are all the same. Never again will I trust them. After being beaten, Ji Weining was so badly injured that he couldn't get out of bed, and he developed a high fever in the middle of the night, which made his mother rush over to take care of him. Even so, Ji Weining didn't forget Pei Xuemei. Before falling unconscious, he pitifully begged his mother to let her stay. His mother, soft-hearted by nature and doting on her only son, impulsively agreed in her emotional state. It was only after agreeing that his mother seemed to realize I was also present, and her expression turned somewhat awkward. "Mother, you should go rest. I'll stay and look after my husband," I said, helping her up from beside the bed, my lips curving into a faint, slightly bitter smile. "Hui Xian, I wasn't," mother-in-law tried to explain awkwardly. I interrupted her, understandingly saying, "I know, mother. Please go rest." She gave me a grateful smile and left, supported by the maids. Outside, the moonlight was as serene as a painting, yet I knew that with Ji Weining's stubbornness, Pei Xuemei would definitely end up staying this time. "Do you really like her that much?" I asked, turning back to the room and gazing at Ji Weining as he lay in a deep sleep. "Even beaten like this, you still pleaded with your mother to keep her before passing out." At that moment, I realized with absolute clarity how ridiculous the lingering affection I held for him truly was. But youth heals quickly. By the next day, Ji Weining was awake, though still unable to get out of bed. When I went to check on him, Pei Xuemei was already there. Ji Weining gently patted her head, comforting her softly. "It's not your fault. It looks worse than it is. Don't blame yourself." Pei Shuemei seemed to be crying, her shoulders trembling. Ahem. I cleared my throat, interrupting their tender moment. As they both turned to look at me, I awkwardly asked, "What are you whispering about in private?" Not even a maid around. "What are you doing here?" Ji Weining's tone turned frosty the moment he spoke to me. I rolled my eyes inwardly at this wife-forgetting scoundrel. "I'm here to change your bandages. What else?" Ji Weining nodded curtly and softened his voice toward Pei Shuemei. "You should head back first. I'll come see you in a couple of days." Pei Shuemei nodded, gave me a slight bow, and walked out. I sat by the bed with the medicine tray, teasing, "Why not let dear Shuemei stay and take care of you? Why wait 2 days?" Ji Weining shot me a glance, finally not as cold. In a surprisingly sincere tone, he said, "Don't cause any trouble for the next few days. Once everything is settled, I'll explain it to you." "I don't want your explanation. A divorce letter would be more useful," I blurted out while changing his dressing, accidentally letting my true thoughts slip. I clamped my mouth shut, but Ji Weining had already heard me. His face darkened with anger. "Divorce? Don't even think about it. Unless I die, you'll always be the daughter-in-law of the Ji family."
Jeez.
"Just a joke. Why so serious?" I muttered awkwardly. Ji Weining sighed, seemingly exasperated. "If only you were a bit smarter." "Ow. Sun Huixian, are you trying to kill your husband?"
Oops.
"Sorry. My hand slipped," I said with a smirk. While Ji Weining recovered, the Ji family held several intense discussions, mainly debating Pei Shuemei's fate. Led by my mother-in-law, the argument was to keep Pei Shuemei since she'd promised Ji Weining. "One more person is just one more pair of chopsticks," she insisted. But third aunt, leading the opposing faction, argued that Ji Weining had blatantly broken family rules by bringing a mistress into the household and must be punished severely. In the end, they decided to send Pei Shuemei to Huangji Temple outside the city to become a nun. When Ji Weining learned she had been sent away, he struggled to get out of bed, determined to bring her back. "Ninger, you should focus on living a good life with Huixian. Stop thinking about that girl." Mother-in-law tried to console him. "She's different, mother," Ji Weining pleaded, his voice trembling. "You'll understand in a few days." To be honest, I had never seen Ji Weining like this, so fragile, like the blue and white porcelain teacup his mother accidentally broke the other day. He truly loved her that much. I felt a pang of sadness and, after his mother left, suggested to Ji Weining, "Why don't you two elope?" He gave me a strange look, as if I had just said something shocking. But for once, I had no ulterior motive. I was genuinely thinking of their happiness. To my surprise, instead of scolding me or outright rejecting the idea, he took a deep breath and said, "Pack up. Take me to Huangji Temple." "You can't be serious. Are you really going to elope?" I stared at him, wide-eyed, utterly shocked that someone as rigid as Ji Weining would take my offhand suggestion seriously. He didn't reply, just turned his back to me, clearly unwilling to say more. As I ordered Allah to prepare the carriage, an odd feeling settled in my chest. Helping my husband and his mistress run away together, was I being too magnanimous for a proper wife? Huangji Temple, once a royal temple during the previous dynasty, had now fallen into decline, but still boasted an impressive scale and attracted numerous worshippers. Pei Shuemei's secluded courtyard for cultivation was at the rear, requiring us to pass through a long corridor. Supporting Ji Weining as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Wait, a faint scent of blood lingered in the air, causing me to stop in my tracks, fully on guard. Beside me, Ji Weining suddenly became agitated, shook off my hand, and hobbled quickly ahead. The courtyard gate burst open as he charged through. Inside, a black-clad man stood amidst the carnage. A maidservant lay lifeless in a pool of blood, and Pei Shuemei had a dagger embedded in her chest, her dress stained crimson. Guards were locked in combat with the black-clad man. Ji Weining stumbled toward Pei Shuemei, trying to help her up, but his injury caused him to fall clumsily to the ground, grimacing in pain. There was no time to waste. I supported Pei Xuemei with one hand and pulled Ji Weining up with the other, and the three of us hurriedly fled. Head to the carriage. They'll come after us, Ji Weining said, limping alongside us at the same pace I managed while helping Pei Xuemei. Thankfully, the carriage wasn't far. We quickly climbed aboard and sped out of Huangji Temple's gates. Sure enough, several black-clad men pursued us relentlessly, gaining ground fast. My anxiety grew as Ji Weining suddenly asked, "You served at the border, didn't you? Do you know any martial arts?" Well, just flashy moves, nothing serious," I stammered nervously, wondering if Ji Weining expected me to stay behind and fight them off. What I didn't anticipate was how deranged Ji Weining truly was. He shoved me off the carriage without warning. Despite driving the carriage for him all this time, this was how he repaid me. As he pushed me, he even said, "Hui Xian, if I die today, you must live on." Was he even speaking human words? I was the one being thrown off, yet he sounded like he was delivering his last will. The roadside was bordered by a small hill. As I tumbled off the carriage, I rolled down the slope, my head spinning as I cursed Ji Weining's ancestors in every possible way. Luckily, my martial arts training saved me from fatal injuries, though I did dislocate my arm, an injury I couldn't fix myself. As night fell, the eerie howls of wild animals echoed through the dense forest, and fear crept over me. The dim starlight offered little visibility. I stumbled forward, falling multiple times, every inch of my body aching as though it had been torn apart. Shivering and in pain, I felt utterly aggrieved. Why had Ji Weining treated me this way? I had been kind enough to bring him to Huangji Temple and even saved Pei Xuemei, yet he had thrown me off the carriage. Once I returned, I vowed to tell my father. I couldn't stay in Chang'an any longer. I just wanted to go home, sobbing all the way. I didn't know how much time had passed when, exhausted and aching, I slumped against the root of a tree and fell into a half-day's sleep, only to wake to someone calling my name. Opening my eyes, I saw firelight in the distance. It was Alai's voice. She had come to find me. I immediately got up and moved toward the light, shouting, "I'm here, over here." Alai had brought a group of people to search for me. When she saw me, she burst into tears, both joyful and distressed, as if she had been the one abandoned in the wilderness. Ji Weining was there too, seated on horseback. How he managed with his injured backside, I had no idea. Ignoring his guilty, hesitant gaze, I climbed onto a stretcher and shut my eyes, letting them carry me back to the Ji residence. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Aunt San were all there. When they saw my battered state, their faces were filled with guilt. Aunt San, in particular, spoke up while the physician tended to my wounds. "Hui Xian, if this life is unbearable, then don't live it. No daughter of the Sun family needs to be tied to the Ji family. I'll write to your father and have him bring you home." Aunt, the grievances I had bottled up burst forth, and for the first time since marrying into Chang'an, I cried my heart out. Aunt Sen patted my back gently. "Good girl, you've been wronged." Suddenly, my father-in-law's scolding voice boomed from outside, followed by the sound of a heavy board striking flesh. I stopped crying and looked at Aunt San in confusion. She raised an eyebrow and glanced outside, scoffing. Now, they act like this for show. They were so bold when bullying a Sun family girl. During my recovery, my mother-in-law frequently visited me. She seemed genuinely worried that I might leave Ji Weining, often reminiscing about the past. "Sai, it's our fault, his father's and mine, for not being there for him as he grew up. We've raised him into this cold, detached person who barely speaks." Her eyes grew misty as she held my hand, but then brightened with a smile. "Hui Xian, since you married in, there's been a spark of life in Ninger. He may not say much, but he does care about you. He's just not good with words, so be patient with him." I couldn't see what my mother-in-law saw. When I heard that Ji Weining had been busying himself in a wheelchair to help Pei Xuemei, I was livid. He didn't care about me. His heart was clearly with Pei Xiume. I told my mother-in-law as much, but she just shook her head, insisting I didn't understand. In my view, it was she who didn't understand. That day seemed utterly ordinary. I had just recovered from the injury on my arm and decided to take a lie to Baihe Tower for a feast to reward my wounded spirit. However, by the time I woke up after eating, I was no longer at Baihe Tower. The kidnappers, seeing me awake, sneered and said, "Madam Ji, forgive us. As long as Jian delivers the Pei family by Chunshir morning before 9 a.m., we will release you." Jian was Ji Weining's formal name. This was utterly unprovoked trouble. On the verge of tears, I cautiously asked, "And if he doesn't deliver them? Then we'll kill you." My vision darkened. This was it. I wasn't getting out alive. I tried to reason with them. Brave heroes, everyone in Chang'an knows Ji Weining, and I don't get along. Perhaps you've captured the wrong hostage. The kidnappers ignored me and merely stared at me coldly. When dawn approached, they dragged me to the edge of a cliff. Their plan was simple. If Ji Weining failed to deliver Pei Xiume by the specified time, they would kill me here and throw my body into the abyss. Peering down the cliff, my knees trembled. Falling from here would mean not just dying, but dying twice over. The wind howled, and my voice quivered. "Big brother, I don't know what Ji Weining did to offend you, but it's definitely unrelated to me. Besides, he doesn't even like me. He might not even come. Why not? Just let me go." "No, he will come," the kidnapper said, staring down the mountain path with unshakable confidence, as if the sunrise was an inevitable truth. I couldn't understand why he was so certain, but my forehead must have had the words "doomed to die" written across it. Alas, was I really destined to perish here so young? As the first rays of sunlight rose over the horizon, the sound of hooves echoed from below. Alai appeared, crying her heart out. "My lady, I brought people to save you." Behind her was a squad of imperial guards in full armor, equipped with bows and crossbows. I could feel the kidnappers' tension beside me. Even the knife pressed against my neck dug in a bit harder. I quickly cried out, "I'm bleeding. Brave hero, take it easy." The kidnapper shot me a quick glance before shouting at the guards, "Jian, I know you're here. If you hand over the Pei family, I'll release your wife. Otherwise, today will mark her death anniversary." Tears streamed down my face as I echoed, "Ji Weining, come out. I'm going to die." Alai sobbed uncontrollably on the other side, and finally, Ji Weining emerged from the bushes. He was dressed in a crimson official robe today, which accentuated his refined, elegant demeanor. But as I glanced behind him, Pei Xiume was nowhere in sight. Though I had expected this, facing his decision to abandon me still left me feeling a pang of disappointment. The kidnappers quickly noticed this as well and barked, "Where's the Pei family?" Ji Weining replied unhurriedly, "Jianghe, I advise you to give up. Today, His Majesty himself presides over the sacrificial altar. The Pei family has blocked the road to present their plea. Not even divine intervention can save the Jiang household now." "Not even her?" the kidnapper growled, clutching me as he stepped back, now dangerously close to the cliff's edge. I hastily screamed, "Brave hero, let's talk this through. Don't get too emotional." Ji Weining frowned and replied, "The Jiang household committed corruption, abused their power, murdered court officials, and committed atrocities worthy of annihilation. No mere girl can save them. Even if you were to take me instead, the Pei family's case is already a foregone conclusion." "Good," the kidnapper roared. "If the Jiang family is doomed, then she can join us in death." With that, he prepared to drag me off the cliff. "Wait," Ji Weining called out just in time. "I am the one working to overturn the Pei family's case. She has nothing to do with it. Release her, and I'll take her place." The kidnapper hesitated, seemingly weighing the offer for deception. I, however, was already trembling uncontrollably. Hearing Ji Weining volunteer to die in my stead left me feeling oddly conflicted. Ultimately, the kidnapper agreed to Ji Weining's proposal, ordering him to dismiss the Imperial Guards and walk over slowly. As I watched Ji Weining inch closer, I found it strangely hard to dislike him, as I once did. Suddenly, I had an overwhelming urge to ask him, "Ji Weining, have you ever liked me?" Though surrounded by people, I was already staring death in the face, so I had nothing to lose. I shouted a question out loud. Ji Weining stumbled slightly at my words, but didn't respond. Instead, his face turned a bright shade of red, the blush creeping all the way to the tips of his ears. What now? Could my mother-in-law have actually been right about this? But finding this out now, of all times, felt a little late. The sudden turn of events came in an instant. First, the sound of arrows slicing through the air rang out, followed by a flash of cold steel before my eyes. Ji Weining lunged toward me, and I felt his warm blood splatter onto my face. The kidnapper holding me was struck by an arrow and fell off the cliff. I, however, was left dangling precariously over the edge, with Ji Weining gripping my arm tightly. His arm had a deep wound, blood streaming down onto me. It was clear he was struggling, his body slowly sliding downward. Realizing that my end was near, I couldn't help but cry and start giving instructions for my final affairs. Our property deeds are in the cloisonné porcelain vase in the study, the one I like the most. There's also a secret compartment in the third drawer of the canopy bed with 1,000,000 silver taels. Make sure to check on it regularly so the rats don't chew it up. I don't like the crane and cloud motif. For my coffin, have them carve treasure patterns with glazed designs instead. And for burial items, don't include anything too valuable. I don't want grave robbers targeting me. Just as I was getting into the details, Alai and the others finally arrived. They pulled me up with great effort. It was then that I noticed several Imperial Guards dressed in green jumping down from the trees. Their arms were equipped with crossbows. These were the Royal Eagle Guards, known for their unerring aim and pinpoint accuracy. Alai rushed to my side, anxiously inspecting me. "Miss, are you alright?" "I'm fine." I shook my head and turned to look at Ji Weining. He was slumped on the ground like a weary dog, panting heavily. His injured arm looked as though it had been soaked in blood. He was a far cry from his usual graceful, jade-like demeanor, utterly disheveled. The guards moved about, discussing how to recover the body from below. Lowering my head, I began to bandage Ji Weining's wound. After all, he had taken a blow meant for me earlier. Perhaps it was the shared brush with death, but the atmosphere between us grew unexpectedly warm. Seizing the moment, I asked him what exactly had happened. It turned out that the Jiang family had exterminated the Pei family, leaving only Pei Xuemei alive. However, no one in the capital, neither the prefecture office, the Court of Judicial Review, nor the Ministry of Justice, dared accept her petition. Everyone in Chang'an knew better than to meddle in such matters, and the Ji family was no exception. But Ji Weining, claiming to be a gentleman, couldn't stand by idly. So, he secretly sheltered Pei Xuemei and began collecting evidence in the shadows. What he hadn't expected was for me to misunderstand the situation and catch him red-handed at the tavern. To avoid arousing suspicion, he decided to play along with the misunderstanding. Wait. I stared at him, a bad feeling creeping in. Pei Xuemei's identity was fake, wasn't it? Ji Weining let out a helpless laugh and nodded. He was actually Pei Darren's only son, Pei Yu. That day, when you barged into the tavern, we had no choice but to have him disguise himself as a woman. I finally understood. No wonder Pei Xuemei, no, Pei Yu, had such large hands. No wonder she wore a veil. No wonder she couldn't speak. But I still had one more question. Why did you push me out of the carriage at Huangji Temple that day? The assassins were targeting Pei Yu. You'd be safer if you stayed away. It had all been a misunderstanding. Thinking about how Ji Weining had been flogged twice because of this, I felt a pang of guilt. I was about to apologize when his tone suddenly shifted. By the way, what's this about 1,000,000 silver taels in the bed's secret compartment? What 1,000,000 taels? You must have misheard. I quickly replied, springing to my feet and calling to a lie. Where's the carriage? I'll go check. Ji Weining's voice followed me, tinged with exasperation. Sun Huixian, you've been hoarding money behind my back while crying poverty every day, and you only give me 10 taels a month. Not listening, like a stubborn child ignoring a scolding. I grabbed a lie and ran far away. The Pei family's case was personally overseen by His Majesty. With a mountain of evidence presented, including witnesses and material proof, the Jiang family's estate was confiscated on the last day of September. Out of compassion, the emperor posthumously honored the wronged Pei Darren as a grand mentor of the first rank. Pei was enlisted into the Royal Eagle Guards to serve the fourth prince. Ji Weining no longer needed to sneak out to gather evidence. Instead, he stayed home every day, nagging me to study. And, occasionally, Sun Huixian, you even hid 50 taels in the chamber pot. Ugh, that's disgusting. Why are you even looking in the chamber pot? If I didn't look, how would I know how much private money you've squirreled away? Hey, don't go digging around. I swear, there's nothing else. And so life went on, passable, but not without its quirks.